I'll never forget the look on my husband's face when I signed over our entire life without a fight. The house, the cars, the savings account, everything we'd built in 12 years of marriage. My lawyer practically had tears in her eyes, begging me to reconsider. My mother called that morning saying I'd lost my mind. Even the mediator looked at me with pity, like I was some broken woman who'd given up. But as I sat in that courtroom 18 months ago, pen in hand, watching Derek smirk beside his 26-year-old girlfriend Amber, I knew exactly what I was doing. He thought he'd won the lottery that day. He actually smiled when I initialed the final page. What he didn't know, what nobody in that room knew except me, was that his lawyer was about to turn completely pale. And when you hear what I discovered 3 months before that courtroom, you'll understand why I handed him everything with a smile on my face. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, or if you're watching this thinking revenge stories are your guilty pleasure, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because I need to know how far stories like mine actually travel. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Let me take you back to where it all started falling apart. Derek and I met in college, one of those classic stories everyone loves, study partners turned soulmates, or so I thought. We got married right after graduation, and I did what so many women do, I put my dreams on hold. I'd been accepted to law school, full scholarship, the whole deal. But Derek had this business idea, some tech startup thing he swore would change our lives. So I deferred my acceptance, took a job as a paralegal to pay our bills, and watched him chase his vision. I told myself it was temporary, that we were building something together. 5 years later, we had our son Jacob. 3 years after that, Derek's business actually took off. We bought our dream house on Meadowbrook Lane, this beautiful colonial with a wraparound porch and enough bedrooms for the family we'd planned to grow. I finally felt like the sacrifice had been worth it. But somewhere around year 10, Derek changed. Or maybe he just stopped pretending. It started small, late nights at the office that stretched into early mornings, expensive dinners on the credit card at restaurants I'd never been to, a sudden obsession with the gym. I'm not stupid. I knew the signs. But when you've invested a decade of your life into someone, when you've got an 8-year-old son asking why daddy's never home for dinner anymore, you try to convince yourself you're being paranoid. Then I found the receipt. $3,000 for jewelry from Tiffany's, dated 2 weeks after my birthday. My birthday gift that year? A card. Not even a nice one of those generic ones from the drugstore with a pre-printed message he didn't even bother to add to. I sat in our kitchen holding that receipt, and something inside me just cracked open. I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I started looking. Really looking. I checked the credit card statements he'd always insisted on handling himself, claiming I worked too hard to worry about bills. Turns out, I should have worried a lot more. There were hotel charges, Venmo payments to women whose names I didn't recognize, monthly subscriptions to dating apps I didn't even know existed. When I finally did confront him, standing in our bedroom with printouts of everything I'd found, he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just sighed, like I was interrupting something important, and said words I'll never forget. Catherine, she makes me feel alive again. You? You're just comfortable. Boring. I need more than this. I stood there, 20 pounds heavier than our wedding day after carrying and raising his child, after working full-time to build his dream, and watched the man I loved turn into a complete stranger right in front of me. 2 weeks later, he came home with divorce papers already drawn up. Not a conversation about counseling, not a suggestion we try to work things out for Jacob's sake, just papers and this casual arrogance that made my blood boil. He actually laid them on the kitchen counter like he was presenting a business proposal. I'm filing for divorce, he said, pouring himself a scotch like we were discussing the weather. My lawyer says with your work schedule and my income, I'll get primary custody of Jacob. You can have him on weekends. Oh, and Amber. That's my girlfriend, she's really great with kids. She used to be a camp counselor. I felt my whole body go cold. This man wanted to take my son, hand him over to some woman he'd been cheating with, and expected me to just accept it. Then he hit me with the real knife. I want the house, both cars, and the investment accounts. You can keep your salary and your car. I think that's fair, don't you? Fair. He thought destroying our family, abandoning his child, and taking everything we'd built together was fair. I looked at those papers, at his smug face, at the girlfriend's name mentioned in the custody section, and something shifted in me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just said, okay. He actually looked disappointed, like he'd wanted a fight. He wanted me to beg, to break down, to give him the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. Instead, I picked up a pen and signed the papers right there. I'll have my lawyer contact yours, I said, my voice steady as stone. He shrugged, finished his drink, and walked out. What Derek didn't know, what he couldn't have known because he'd spent years underestimating me, was that I'd already made a phone call that morning. Not to a therapist. Not to my mother. To someone who was about to change everything. I want to pause here for a second, because some of you watching are probably thinking I gave up too easily, that I should have fought him right there. Drop a comment and tell me honestly, would you have signed those papers, or would you have done something different? I'm genuinely curious what you would do, because what I did next was calculated in a way that still surprises me. While Derek was celebrating his easy victory with Amber, probably toasting to how smoothly the divorce was going, I was in my car driving to meet someone Derek had never even heard about. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she wasn't just any lawyer, she was the divorce attorney who'd gotten the governor's wife $40 million in the most brutal settlement our state had ever seen. She was expensive, ruthless, and had a reputation for destroying arrogant husbands who thought they could steamroll their wives. When I walked into her office that afternoon, she took one look at me and said, "Let me guess. He thinks you're going to roll over." I nodded. She smiled. Good. Let's make him think that for as long as possible. Over the next 3 months, I did something I'd never done in my entire marriage. I investigated my own husband. I hired a private investigator, a guy Patricia recommended who specialized in financial fraud. I started documenting everything, every late night, every suspicious charge, every lie Derek told about where he'd been. And what I found made the affair with Amber look like nothing. Derek had a gambling problem I'd never known about. Online poker, sports betting, cryptocurrency trading, he'd been pouring our money into schemes and losses for over 2 years. Our joint savings account, which should have had over $180,000, was down to $23,000. He'd maxed out 3 secret credit cards I didn't even know existed, racking up $75,000 in debt. The business that was supposedly thriving? Failing, because Derek had stopped working and started partying. But the worst part, the part that made my hands shake when the investigator showed me the evidence, was the second mortgage. 6 months before Derek filed for divorce, he'd taken out a $300,000 second mortgage on our house. On the house we'd bought together, that had both our names on the deed. Except I'd never signed those papers. I'd never even seen them. When the investigator showed me the mortgage documents, I stared at the signature that was supposed to be mine, and it wasn't. It was close, someone had tried, but it wasn't my handwriting. Derek had forged my signature on a $300,000 loan. That's fraud. That's a felony. And suddenly, I had leverage I'd never imagined. Patricia looked at those documents like Christmas had come early. "Do you know what this means?" she asked. I did. It meant Derek hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he'd committed a crime using my name. And he had no idea I knew. But wait, it gets so much worse. The investigator kept digging, and 2 weeks before our first mediation session, he called me with something that made me actually laugh out loud from the sheer audacity. Derek didn't just have Amber. He'd had at least 3 other affairs over the past 2 years. Hotel receipts, Venmo payments for rent to a woman named Vanessa, gifts charged to our joint credit card for people I'd never met. And Vanessa? She was pregnant. 7 months pregnant. The investigator had photos of Derek meeting her at a clinic, bank records showing he'd been paying her $3,000 a month in what could only be described as hush money. She'd been threatening to go public unless he paid her $100,000. My husband had gotten another woman pregnant, had been paying her off with our money, and was now trying to take everything in the divorce including our son. I sat in my car reading that report, and I started laughing so hard I cried. Not from sadness, from the absolute poetic justice of what I was about to do. Here's what I need you to understand, and why you should hit that like button if you're still with me. Derek thought he was winning. Every mediation session, every lawyer meeting, he showed up more confident than the last. Amber started coming with him, already talking about redecorating their house, about which bedroom would be Jacob's when he stayed with them on weekends. My lawyer Patricia played her role perfectly, acting frustrated with me, like I was being difficult by not fighting harder. We let Derek think I was broken, defeated, too tired to battle. Meanwhile, I was building a case that would bury him. I reported the forged mortgage to the bank and to the district attorney's office. A fraud investigation was quietly opened. The house Derek wanted so badly, was flagged. It couldn't be sold, couldn't be refinanced, couldn't be transferred without court approval until the investigation was complete. And Derek had no idea. The mediation sessions were almost entertaining once I knew what I knew. Derek would sit there in his expensive suits, the ones he'd bought with money from our drained savings, and lay out his demands. He wanted the house, both cars, the investment accounts, everything except Jacob. I'm just not cut out for full-time parenting, he actually said during one session, like our son was a hobby he'd grown tired of. Catherine's better at that stuff anyway. I'll take him weekends, holidays, the fun times. Patricia would glance at me, and I'd give her this little nod. We had a plan. Every time Derek pushed for more, we'd push back just enough to make it look like a fight, but not enough to actually stop him. We were letting him hang himself with his own greed. My friends thought I'd given up. My family staged an intervention, begging me to fight for what was mine. Even Jacob's teacher pulled me aside one day, gently suggesting I seek therapy because I seemed detached. I wasn't detached. I was patient. And patience, I was learning, is the most powerful weapon an underestimated woman can have. Then came the final settlement offer. Derek's lawyer sent it over 2 weeks before our court date, and it was exactly what we'd expected. Derek gets the house, both cars, the investment accounts, and the vacation condo in the mountains I'd forgotten we even owned. I get Jacob, my personal belongings, and my 10-year-old sedan. Patricia read it to me over the phone, and I could hear her trying not to laugh. He really thinks you're going to sign this, she said. I know, I replied. Tell him I'll sign it. Tell him I just want this over with. Tell him he wins. There was a pause on the line. Catherine, are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. I'd never been more sure of anything in my life. Send the acceptance. Let's get him to court. And if you're sitting there thinking I'm crazy, that I'm making the biggest mistake of my life, go ahead and comment that too. Because what happened in that courtroom 3 days later is something Derek will regret for the rest of his life. The morning of the final hearing, I kissed Jacob goodbye at my mother's house. He was spending the day with her, playing in her backyard, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. I drove to the courthouse alone, wearing a simple navy dress, no jewelry, no makeup beyond the basics. I looked exactly like what Derek thought I was, a defeated woman who'd given up. Derek arrived in his Porsche, Amber beside him wearing head-to-toe designer everything, both of them looking like they were heading to a celebration instead of a divorce hearing. They walked past me in the hallway without a word, Derek's hand possessively on Amber's lower back, making sure I saw. I just smiled. Let him have his moment. Inside the courtroom, the judge reviewed our settlement line by line. Patricia sat beside me, her face carefully neutral. Derek's lawyer, a guy named Martin who charged $500 an hour to help men like Derek destroy their families, looked confident and bored. This was routine for him. An easy win. The judge asked me directly. Mrs. Monroe, do you understand that by signing this agreement, you're relinquishing all claims to the marital home at 847 Meadowbrook Lane, both vehicles, and all joint investment accounts? Yes, Your Honor, I said clearly. I understand. And you're doing this voluntarily, without coercion? Completely voluntarily, Your Honor. I just want what's best for my son. Derek actually smiled. Actually smiled at me across the courtroom, like he'd just won the Super Bowl. That's when I watched Martin's face change. He was reviewing the final documents one more time, just a formality before filing, when his eyes stopped on something. He read it again. Then again. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. He leaned over to Derek, whispered something urgent. Derek's smile faltered. What? I heard him hiss. Martin showed him the document, pointing at something specific. Derek's face went from triumphant to confused to absolutely horrified in about 10 seconds. He looked at me, then at Patricia, then back at the papers. Your Honor, Martin stood up, his voice shaking slightly. I need to request a brief recess to consult with my client about some property details. The judge frowned. Counselor, we've been through 6 months of mediation. Your client agreed to these terms. What property details? Martin looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The primary residence, Your Honor. There appears to be some complications my client wasn't aware of. Derek was frantically whispering at him now, probably asking what the hell was going on. The judge was not amused. Mr. Martin, your client has had ample time to review this settlement. Does he wish to proceed or not? Martin looked at Derek. Derek looked at the papers, then at me with the first flicker of real fear I'd seen. Too late, I thought. Way too late. The judge gave Martin 5 minutes to consult with Derek in the hallway, and I watched them through the courtroom's glass doors like I was watching a car crash in slow motion. Martin was pointing at documents, his face red, his hands gesturing wildly. Derek kept shaking his head, looking back at me with this expression of dawning horror that I'd been waiting 18 months to see. Amber stood off to the side, checking her phone, completely oblivious to the fact that her luxury lifestyle was evaporating in real time. When they came back in, Derek looked like he'd aged 10 years. His confidence was gone, replaced by this panicked energy that made his hands shake as he sat down. Martin addressed the judge, his voice careful and measured. Your Honor, we'd like to proceed with the settlement as written. The judge nodded. Very well. Mrs. Monroe, please sign here. I took the pen, and for just a second, I let myself meet Derek's eyes. He was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time, like the woman he'd called boring and comfortable had just turned into someone he didn't recognize. Good, I thought. It's about time. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. If this story is giving you even a fraction of the satisfaction I felt in that moment, hit that subscribe button. Seriously. Because what's about to happen is the kind of justice that doesn't come around often, and you're going to want to be here for the rest of this. Also, drop a comment telling me, have you ever had a moment where someone completely underestimated you and you got to prove them wrong? I want to hear your stories too. I signed every page. The house, signed over to Derek. Both cars, his now. The investment accounts, what little was left of them, all his. The vacation condo I'd actually forgotten we owned. Derek's problem now. With each signature, I watched him sink deeper into his chair, and I watched Martin look more and more uncomfortable. When the judge declared our marriage officially dissolved and the settlement binding, Amber actually squealed and grabbed Derek's arm. We did it, baby, she whispered, loud enough for half the courtroom to hear. Derek didn't respond. He was still staring at those documents like they were a death sentence. Because in a way, they were. The judge dismissed us, and I stood up, collected my one small folder of personal papers, and walked toward the exit. I made it about halfway down the courthouse hallway before I heard Derek's voice behind me, angry and desperate. Catherine. Catherine, wait. I stopped but didn't turn around immediately. I let him come to me, let him feel what it was like to chase someone who didn't want to be caught anymore. When I finally faced him, his face was flushed, his expensive tie loosened like he couldn't breathe properly. Amber was trailing behind him, looking annoyed that he was talking to me. What did you do? He demanded, his voice low and shaking. What the hell did you do to the house? I tilted my head, playing innocent. What do you mean? You got the house, Derek. Everything you wanted. Congratulations. His jaw clenched. Martin says there's some kind of investigation. Something about the mortgage. What are you talking about? I smiled then, and I made sure it was the coldest smile I could manage. Oh, you mean the second mortgage you took out 6 months ago? The $300,000 loan you used my name for without my knowledge? I watched the blood drain from his face. Yeah, I know about that. I've known for months. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Behind him, Amber had stopped scrolling on her phone and was actually paying attention now. You knew? He stammered. Of course I knew, I said, my voice steady and calm. I'm not stupid, Derek. I might be boring and comfortable, but I'm not stupid. I pulled out my phone, opened a folder, and showed him a document. See this? This is the fraud report I filed with the bank 3 months ago. And this one? That's the police report I filed with the district attorney's office. Someone forged my signature on a $300,000 mortgage. That's a felony, in case you weren't aware. The house you just won in our divorce? It's under a legal hold. You can't sell it. You can't refinance it. You can't even transfer the title until the fraud investigation is complete. And that investigation, Derek, is going to take about 18 to 24 months. Maybe longer. I watched understanding crash over him like a wave. You can't, you wouldn't. He started, but I cut him off. I already did. See, here's what you didn't know while you were busy draining our accounts and gambling away our future. That second mortgage? It's been declared fraudulent. The bank has already ruled that I never signed those papers, which means the loan is invalid. But you know what's not invalid? Your responsibility for it. You took out that loan, Derek. You spent that money. The bank wants it back, and now that you own the house solely, guess whose problem that is? His face had gone from red to pale to almost gray. But that's $300,000, he whispered. Yes it is, I agreed cheerfully. Plus the original mortgage of $400,000. So you're on the hook for about $700,000 on a house that's currently worth about $800,000, except you can't sell it because of the fraud hold. Oh, and those mortgage payments? They're due monthly. Hope you budgeted for that. Amber stepped forward then, her perfectly made-up face scrunched in confusion. Wait, what does this mean? We can't live in the house? I looked at her for the first time, really looked at her, this 26-year-old who thought stealing someone's husband came with no consequences. You can live in it, I said. Derek owns it now. Free and clear, according to our divorce settlement. Of course, he'll need to make the monthly payments of about $4,500, plus property taxes, plus utilities, plus maintenance. On a house he can't sell. With money he doesn't have. But sure, move right in. I'm sure it'll be wonderful. The look on her face was almost as satisfying as the look on Derek's. Almost. Derek found his voice again, desperate now. The cars. I got the cars. Those are worth something. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Oh, the cars. Yes, you got both cars. Did Martin explain to you that they're both leased? In your name? With balloon payments due in 60 days? His eyes went wide. Balloon payments? $40,000 each, I said, consulting my phone like I was reading him a grocery list. The Porsche you drove here today and the Range Rover sitting in your driveway. Both leased with balloon payments due at the end of the term, which happens to be next month. You can either pay $80,000 cash to own them, or return them and lose all the equity. Your choice. Derek looked like he might throw up right there in the courthouse hallway. You knew about this. You knew about all of this and you just let me take it? I gave you exactly what you asked for, I said simply. Everything except our son. Those were your words, Derek. You wanted everything. Well, congratulations. You got it. Amber was backing away now, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor, her face registering what her sugar mama brain was finally computing. Derek wasn't rich. Derek was buried in debt. And here's where I want you to pay attention, because this is important. Drop a like on this video if you think what I did was justified. And if you think I went too far, comment that too. I want to know where you stand on this, because it's about to get even more complicated. Derek was spiraling now, running his hands through his hair, his breath coming in short gasps. The investment accounts. I got those too. There has to be something there. I shook my head. You got the investment accounts as they exist today. Which, if you'd bothered to check the statements from last month instead of letting your lawyer rubber stamp everything, you'd know contain about $11,000. Total. I withdrew my legal 50% before filing for divorce, which was about $90,000. That money is now in an irrevocable trust for Jacob's education. Untouchable by either of us. What's left in those accounts is yours. All $11,000 of it. Enjoy. He was openly panicking now. This can't be legal. You can't just trap me like this. I didn't trap you, I said, and my voice was ice. You trapped yourself. Every dollar you gambled away, every crypto scheme you fell for, every hotel room you paid for with our joint credit card while I was home raising our son, those were your choices. I just documented them. The forged mortgage? That was all you, Derek. I reported a crime. A crime you committed using my name. Everything else? You demanded it in the settlement. I just gave you what you wanted. That's when Amber spoke up, her voice shrill. This is insane. He can't afford all of this. We were supposed to be living in that house. I turned to her, and I let every ounce of contempt I felt show on my face. Then I suggest you get a better job than personal trainer. Oh wait, you're not even doing that anymore, are you? Derek had you quit so you could focus on being available for him. Interesting career choice. Her face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. She looked at Derek, waiting for him to defend her, to do something. But Derek wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring at me with something that looked almost like respect mixed with pure hatred. I'll fight this, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. I'll take you back to court. I'll prove you manipulated the settlement. With what lawyer? I asked. Martin charges $500 an hour, and you just committed to about $700,000 in housing debt plus $80,000 for the cars. Your business is failing, I have the financial records to prove it. Your credit cards are maxed out. And now that the divorce is final, you can't touch any money I have. So please, Derek, tell me which lawyer you're going to hire to fight a battle you already lost? He had no answer. For the first time in 12 years, Derek had absolutely nothing to say. That's when the real twist happened. The elevator doors at the end of the hallway opened, and a woman stepped out. She was in her late 20s, visibly pregnant, with dark hair and tired eyes. She looked around the courthouse lobby, spotted Derek, and started walking toward us with purpose. I knew who she was immediately. I'd seen enough photos from the private investigator's file. Vanessa. Derek saw her at the same moment I did, and the color that had just started returning to his face drained right back out. No, he whispered. No, not here. Not now. But Vanessa wasn't stopping. She walked right up to our little group, barely glancing at Amber or me, focusing entirely on Derek. We need to talk, she said, her voice carrying that particular tone of a woman who was done being patient. You've been dodging my calls for 2 weeks. My lawyer says if you don't respond by Friday, we're filing. Filing what? Amber asked, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Vanessa finally looked at Amber, taking in the designer outfit, the expensive shoes, the complete cluelessness. Filing a paternity suit, she said flatly. Derek is the father of my baby. He's been paying me to keep quiet about it for 7 months, but the money stopped 3 weeks ago. So now we're doing this the legal way. The hallway went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Amber's mouth fell open, her eyes darting between Derek and Vanessa like she was watching a tennis match. You're pregnant? With his baby? Vanessa put a protective hand on her belly. 7.5 months. Due in 6 weeks. And your boyfriend here has been paying me $3,000 a month to stay quiet, at least until the money ran out. Now my lawyer says we're looking at 18 years of child support, plus he wants $100,000 for pain and suffering and breach of verbal contract. Amber turned to Derek, her face a mixture of betrayal and disgust. You got someone else pregnant? While we were together? Derek was trying to speak, his mouth moving but no words coming out. He looked like a man drowning, grasping for anything that might save him. Finally, he managed, it was before us, babe. Before we got serious. I was going to tell you, before us? Vanessa interrupted, pulling out her phone. We were sleeping together until 4 months ago, Derek. I have the texts to prove it. Want me to read them out loud, or should I save them for court? If you're watching this and thinking this can't possibly get worse for Derek, hit that subscribe button, because karma isn't done with him yet. Not even close. Amber was backing away from Derek now, shaking her head. You told me you loved me. You said we were building a life together. You divorced your wife for me. He divorced me because I let him, I interjected, unable to help myself. And for the record, he didn't leave me for you. He left me for whatever made him feel good in the moment. You just happened to be convenient. Amber's eyes filled with tears, and she looked at Derek like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. The house is underwater. The cars are leased. You have no money. And now there's a baby? She let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. I quit my job for you. I moved into your apartment. I've been living off your credit cards for 6 months. Our credit cards, I corrected. The ones he maxed out using our joint accounts. You've been living off money he stole from his family. Hope those designer bags were worth it. That did it. Amber spun on her heel and started walking toward the exit, her heels clicking rapidly on the floor. Derek lunged after her. Amber, wait. Let me explain. She didn't even slow down. We're done, Derek. Lose my number. And just like that, she was gone, disappearing through the courthouse doors into the parking lot. Derek stood frozen, watching her leave, before slowly turning back to face Vanessa and me. Vanessa crossed her arms, all business now. My lawyer's office. Friday at 2 p.m. You can bring your attorney, or you can come alone, but either way, we're settling this. Child support, medical expenses, everything. And if you try to dodge this, I'll file with the state and they'll garnish your wages. I don't have wages, Derek said numbly. I filed for bankruptcy last month. The business failed. Even I hadn't known that part. Vanessa's expression shifted from anger to something almost like pity. Then you're going to have a very difficult conversation with a family court judge. They don't care if you're broke, Derek. They care about the child. Figure it out. She turned to leave, then paused and looked at me. You're his ex-wife? I nodded. Congratulations on getting out, she said simply. Then she was gone too, leaving Derek and me alone in the hallway. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Derek just stood there, this man who 6 hours ago thought he'd won everything, now holding the ashes of his entire life in his hands. You planned this, he finally said, his voice hollow. Every bit of it. You knew about the mortgage, the cars, the accounts. You knew about Vanessa. You knew everything and you let me walk right into it. I gave you a choice, I corrected. Every step of the way, you could have chosen differently. You could have been honest. You could have been a father to Jacob. You could have worked on our marriage instead of gambling it away and sleeping with anything that moved. You made your choices, Derek. I just made sure you lived with the consequences. He laughed then, a broken sound. The house I can't sell. The cars I can't afford. A baby on the way with a woman I barely know. No business, no savings, no girlfriend. You destroyed me. No, I said firmly. You destroyed yourself. I just refused to go down with the ship. His phone buzzed, and he pulled it out with shaking hands. Whatever he saw on the screen made his face go even paler. What now? I asked, almost curious. The bank, he whispered. They're starting foreclosure proceedings on the house. I missed 2 payments while the divorce was going through. I probably should have felt bad for him in that moment. But all I could think about was Jacob, asking me last month why Daddy didn't want to live with him anymore, tears streaming down his 8-year-old face. All I could think about was the years I'd spent building Derek's dream while mine collected dust. All I could think about was him calling me boring and comfortable while spending our money on other women. You should probably call a lawyer, I said. Oh wait, you can't afford one. I started to walk away, then stopped and turned back one last time. By the way, Derek, that inheritance from my grandmother you never knew about? It came through last month. $400,000, separate property, completely untouchable in the divorce. I'm using half of it to buy a small house for Jacob and me. The other half is invested for our future. We're going to be just fine. The look on his face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent planning this. Let me know in the comments if you think Derek got what he deserved, or if I should have shown mercy. Because honestly, I'm still processing whether I'm the hero or the villain of this story. I left him standing in that hallway and walked out into the sunshine. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother asking how it went. It's done, I texted back. I'm free. And I was. Free from the lies, the betrayal, the constant feeling of not being enough. Free to build a life where Jacob felt secure and loved. Free to finally go back to school and finish that law degree I'd deferred 15 years ago. Patricia called me that evening, laughing so hard she could barely speak. I've been doing this for 20 years, she said, and I have never seen a man's face change colors that fast. You're a legend, Catherine. An absolute legend. I didn't feel like a legend. I felt tired and relieved and maybe a little bit vindicated. 6 months passed. I moved into a cozy 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood with good schools, used some of the inheritance money to furnish it exactly how Jacob and I wanted. No more walking on eggshells around Derek's moods, no more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Jacob started therapy to process the divorce, and within weeks, his teacher called to tell me he was like a different child, smiling more, participating in class, making friends. Whatever you're doing, she said, keep doing it. He's thriving. I enrolled in an online law program, something I could do while working full-time and raising Jacob. It was hard, juggling everything, but it was my choice. My dream. Not something I was doing for anyone else. I even started dating again, nothing serious, just coffee here and there with a nice accountant named Marcus I'd met through a friend. He was kind, stable, and thought it was amazing that I was going back to school. You're impressive, he said on our 3rd date. Not exciting or alive or any of the words Derek had used for other women. Just impressive. It felt good. Derek, on the other hand, spiraled. I heard through mutual friends that he'd moved back in with his parents after the foreclosure went through. The house at Meadowbrook Lane was seized by the bank, sold at auction for barely enough to cover the legitimate first mortgage, leaving Derek still owing thousands. The cars were repossessed. His bankruptcy was finalized, which meant he couldn't take on new debt, couldn't get credit cards, couldn't even rent a decent apartment without a cosigner. Vanessa's baby was born, a girl, and the paternity test confirmed what everyone already knew. The court ordered Derek to pay $1,200 a month in child support, money he didn't have. His parents ended up hiring him an attorney to handle the fraud charges from the forged mortgage. He got probation and fines, avoided jail time but barely. The legal fees wiped out his parents' retirement savings. I heard his mother wouldn't speak to him for months. His father gave him a job at the hardware store they owned, minimum wage plus a few dollars, just enough to keep him off the streets. I ran into him once, completely by accident, at a grocery store about 8 months after the divorce. He was in the checkout line in front of me, counting out cash for a small cart of generic brand items. He'd lost weight, his clothes hung off him like they were borrowed. When he turned and saw me, I watched a whole range of emotions cross his face: shame, anger, regret, resentment. "Catherine," he said quietly. "Derek," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before he finally said, "I heard you went back to school." "Law school." "Paralegal to start," I corrected. "But yes, eventually law school." "How are you?" It was a stupid question, and we both knew it. "I'm alive," he said, which wasn't really an answer. "How's Jacob?" That question surprised me. In 8 months, he'd exercised his visitation rights exactly twice, both times showing up late and leaving early. "He's great," I said honestly. "Really happy. Doing well in school." Derek nodded, and for a second, I saw something that might have been genuine remorse flash across his face. "That's good. I'm glad he's okay." The cashier called him forward, and he paid for his groceries with crumpled bills from his pocket. As he picked up his bags, he turned back to me one more time. "You knew," he said, and it wasn't quite a question. "You knew everything that would happen and you let me have it all anyway." "I gave you what you said you wanted," I replied. "Everything except our son." "I made a mistake," he said, and his voice cracked. "I know that now. I lost everything that mattered chasing things that didn't." I wanted to feel triumphant in that moment, wanted to feel vindicated and satisfied. Instead, I just felt tired. "You didn't lose Jacob, Derek. You gave him away. You told the court you weren't cut out for single parenting. Those were your words, not mine." He flinched like I'd slapped him. I was angry. I was stupid. I thought. "You thought you could have everything without consequences," I interrupted. "You thought you could blow up your family and walk away richer and happier. You were wrong." He stood there for a long moment, just holding his grocery bags, looking like he wanted to say something else. Finally, he just nodded and walked away. I never saw him again after that, at least not in person. His visitation with Jacob dwindled to nothing. Jacob stopped asking about him after a while, and when he did mention Derek, it was always in the past tense, like talking about someone who used to be part of our lives but wasn't anymore. Derek sent a birthday card on Jacob's 9th birthday with $20 inside. That was it. No phone call, no visit, just a generic card and a 20. Jacob used the money to buy comic books and never mentioned it again. I heard through the grapevine that Derek eventually got a girlfriend, someone he met at his AA meetings. Turned out the drinking I'd noticed had been worse than I thought. They got a small apartment together, and he was working 2 jobs trying to dig himself out of debt. I hoped, for his sake and for his daughter's sake, that he'd learned something. But it wasn't my problem anymore. A year after the divorce, I got a phone call that caught me completely off guard. It was Martin, Derek's divorce lawyer. Mrs. Monroe, or, I suppose it's Ms. Monroe now, he started, sounding uncomfortable. I wanted to reach out because I owe you an apology. I was so surprised I almost hung up. An apology for what? For underestimating you, he said bluntly. I've been practicing family law for 15 years, and I've never been outmaneuvered like that. When Derek came to me, he painted a picture of a housewife who'd let herself go, who wasn't paying attention to finances, who'd roll over in the divorce. I believed him. I advised him to push for everything because I thought you wouldn't fight back. I was wrong. I didn't know what to say to that. I appreciate you calling, I managed. But I didn't outmaneuver anyone. I just paid attention. You did more than that, Martin said. You played the long game while we were playing checkers. The forged mortgage, the strategic withdrawal of funds, letting him think he was winning right up until it was too late, that was masterful. Patricia said you did most of the strategy yourself. I had good lawyers, I said, deflecting the compliment. And I had motivation. Derek wanted to take my son and give him to his mistress. That tends to sharpen your focus. Martin was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I don't represent people like Derek anymore. Cases where the husband is clearly in the wrong, trying to punish his wife for his own failures. Your case was a wake-up call. So, thank you for that, I suppose. After we hung up, I sat with that conversation for a long time. I hadn't set out to teach anyone lessons or to be some kind of divorce warrior. I'd just been a mother protecting her child and a woman refusing to be destroyed by a man who'd already taken enough from her. But if Derek's downfall had taught his lawyer something, maybe it meant something. Maybe it meant other women wouldn't be steamrolled the way he tried to steamroll me. Today, 2 years after that courtroom hearing, my life looks completely different. Jacob is 10 now, thriving in a school he loves, with friends who come over for sleepovers and birthday parties. He calls Marcus Mom's friend Marcus, but they get along great, and Marcus never tries to be something he's not. We're taking things slow, but for the first time in years, I'm in a relationship built on honesty and respect instead of secrets and lies. I graduated with my paralegal certification and I'm working at a firm that's paying for me to attend law school part-time. In 3 years, I'll have my law degree. In 4, I'll be practicing. My focus? Family law, helping women who are going through what I went through. I've already started volunteering at a legal aid clinic on weekends, and the stories I hear break my heart and fuel my determination in equal measure. So many women who don't know their rights, who trust their husbands to handle everything, who get blindsided when the marriage falls apart. Derek is still struggling, as far as I know. He's consistent with child support now, probably because the state garnishes it directly from his paycheck before he even sees the money. He's seen Vanessa's daughter a handful of times, but he's not really in her life. His relationship with Jacob is virtually non-existent, a card at Christmas, a text on his birthday if he remembers. Jacob doesn't seem bothered by it anymore, which breaks my heart in a different way. No child should be so used to disappointment from a parent that they stop expecting anything at all. But he's happy, he's healthy, and he knows he's loved unconditionally. That's what matters. People ask me sometimes if I regret how things went down, if I wish I'd handled the divorce differently. The truth? I regret marrying someone who turned out to be so different from who I thought he was. I regret the years I spent making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. I regret that Jacob has to grow up without a real father. But the divorce itself? The way I handled it? I don't regret that for a second. Derek wanted everything except our son. I gave him exactly what he asked for. The house he couldn't afford, the cars he couldn't keep, the debts he'd hidden, the consequences of his choices. And I kept the only thing that actually mattered, my child, my integrity, and my future. He thought winning meant taking everything. I knew winning meant protecting what was worth keeping. That's the difference between us. That's why I'm building a life I'm proud of, and he's still trying to dig himself out of the hole he created. Sometimes people ask if I ever hear from him, if he's ever tried to apologize or make amends. He hasn't, and honestly, I don't need him to. An apology won't change what he did or who he is. It won't give Jacob his childhood back or return the years I spent building a life with someone who was lying to me the whole time. What's done is done. But here's what I want you to take away from my story, and why I'm sharing it with all of you watching. Marriage betrayal happens. Divorce happens. People you trust will sometimes reveal themselves to be exactly who you feared they might be. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can fall apart, let them take everything, accept the narrative that you're not strong enough or smart enough to fight back. Or you can document everything, protect what matters, and make sure that when the dust settles, you're still standing. I chose to stand. I chose to fight smart instead of fighting loud. I chose my son over everything else. And 2 years later, I'm happier than I'd been in over a decade. Derek got what he wanted, everything except the one thing that would have given his life meaning. I got what I needed, freedom, peace, and a future built on truth instead of lies. So yeah, he thought he won our divorce. He thought signing those papers and getting the house and the cars meant he'd beaten me. What he didn't understand until it was too late was that I'd already won the only battle that mattered. I won my son's happiness. I won my self-respect. I won my life back. And that's worth more than any house or car or bank account could ever be. If this story resonated with you, if you've been through something similar or if you know someone who has, I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me your story. Tell me where you're watching from and whether you think I was justified or if I went too far. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this, because trust me, I have plenty. Hit that like button if you believe in standing up for yourself even when everyone thinks you should back down. And to anyone out there going through their own divorce, their own betrayal, their own moment of wondering if they're strong enough to survive this, you are. You're stronger than you know. Document everything. Protect what matters. And never, ever let someone's cruelty make you forget your worth. This is my story. This is how I won the divorce my husband thought he'd already won. And this is how I got my life back.